Слава нашим доблестным вооруженным силам! За Россию! За победу! Ура!
However, he did say he could destroy NATO in 10 minutes, implying nuclear war. My biggest shock was that there was no pushback from the U.S. or NATO, which leaves an opening to Putin to actually, as a minimum, use tactical nukes. Hi guys, and welcome back to the Storm and Cellar. I was on the road filming last week, and so there's a whole lot to unpack this week about Russia and Ukraine. Well, May 9th was Victory Day in Russia. Putin's hopes of a quick victory have been dashed by stiff resistance by the Ukrainians and an influx of sophisticated weapons by NATO nations. Of course, Putin's speech was not what was expected from the West. Concerning Ukraine, he gave no sense of victory or defeat in his speech. He also did not parade captured Ukrainian soldiers through the streets as was thought he would do. However, he did say he could destroy NATO in 10 minutes, implying nuclear war. My biggest shock was that there was no pushback from the U.S. or NATO, which leaves an opening to Putin to actually, as a minimum, use tactical nukes. As for funding for the Ukrainians, according to Andrei Elarinov, a former economic advisor to Putin and now a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy, he says the U.S. is not giving enough per capita, and Germany, the largest economy in Europe, is giving even less. Well, there must be something up at the White House. The U.S. has already earmarked $1.8 billion for Ukraine and has asked for another $40 billion, but hardly any of the money so far has been sent to in a way of a form of weapons to Ukraine. Also, with all bills, there's a lot of pork in this one as well. So those things happen, I guess. But what's up with the sudden change in thinking by the U.S.? The only thing I can think of is that early on, the U.S. and NATO thought Russia would pummel Ukraine in a few days and didn't want to stick their necks out too far for Ukraine. Now that Ukraine is holding their own with the help of the U.S. and NATO, there might be a change of heart. What are our other enemies thinking right now? Remember, in one of my recent videos, I said China, Iran, and North Korea is watching all of this unfurl daily. Could Russia's stalemate in Ukraine cause others to take a hard look at Russia's failures in Ukraine and their loss of world public opinion? Interestingly, Chinese tech giants are quietly pulling back from support for Russia. However, Russia's still playing out their cards. The ruble is bouncing back to its pre-war economy, and Russia wants off the dollar so bad, India and China are buying Russian oil on the cheap. Also, to send a message to some of the former Soviet satellite countries, Russia cut off the gas supply to Bulgaria and Poland, who, by the way, has a good war reserve stockpile, so no problem in the short term. Let's face it. A lot of Russia's invasion of Ukraine has to do with oil and gas, whether directly or indirectly. When Nord Stream 2 was almost complete, Putin no longer needed the pipeline in Ukraine. It then made Ukraine a future target of opportunity for other strategic goals. However, there was a lot of pressure back then from the U.S. and other NATO nations to shut the pipeline down, feeling that Russia could at some point use it to strong-arm NATO by cutting off the flow to those countries. Now, I can't imagine that happening. Can you? Oh, by the way, Germany and Austria vehemently protested the shutdown. However, the day that President Biden was elected, he waived all previous sanctions against Russia, and the Nord Stream 2 construction was resumed. Believe it or not, Russia's making $850 million a day off of gas and oil from some countries in Europe. That's over $310 billion a year. As for the war in Ukraine, Russia continues missile strikes against Odessa, bombing Mariupol unmercifully, and even launched missile attacks against Kiev during the UN chief's visit. Talk about giving the middle finger to the UN. Now, I sense something is terribly wrong in both Russia's tactics and weapon selections. Russia's using dumb bombs on targets that needed precision weapons and slinging expensive hypersonic weapons on hotels. The other day, Russian Air Force flew 32 bombers against the steel mill where Ukrainian soldiers are dug in, and 8 of those were reported as strategic Tu-160 Blackjack bombers. What did they need those for? As General William Tecumseh Sherman once said, war is hell. As he unleashed fury upon the state of Georgia during the war between the states, and so is Putin's war on Ukraine and Ukrainians on Russian soldiers. This is turning into a bloody and barbaric war. It's reported that Ukrainian Azov battalion is executing captured Russian soldiers. Russian news agencies are nonchalantly reporting that World War III is more than likely going to result in a nuclear war. This week, it was leaked from the Pentagon that U.S. intelligence is aiding the Ukrainians to kill Russian generals. Remember, as in all great wars, countries start choosing up sides like a sandlot baseball game. Finland and Sweden, who are always neutral, are expected to join NATO in the next week or so. Also, starvation and food shortages due to Russian occupation of the Ukrainian ports and a fertilizer shortage, that's going to cause a lot of problems as well. People are going to start taking sides over starvation. Imagine that. By the way, Ukrainians need to find another way to get their stored grain out over land and into Western Europe, because they're not getting them out of those ports. You know, man is no different than a wild dog. When cornered, they'll attack rather than tucking its tail and trying to find a less deadly way out. Whether Putin is acting irrationally due to health reasons or just plans on running the tables for an all or nothing and go down in history as the emperor who conquered Europe. So I'll leave it there for now. Tell me what you think in the comments section below. Also, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, always make sure your takeoff and landings equal.